Part 3 of how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So like I said, I had made reservations for him and I to go out to dinner so that way I could hopefully spark up the conversation about it. So when we finally sat down, I had started up the conversation. I had told him that when I took my ring in to get it fixed, I also got it appraised. And his face immediately changed after that, but he wasn't saying anything. He was like, oh, okay, how did that go? So at this point, I was tired of beating around the bush, and I was like, why wouldn't you just tell me if we were having money troubles? And he was like, what do you mean? We're not having any money troubles. I'm fine. One thing about my husband is that he is very wealthy. And he takes pride in the fact that he is very wealthy. So obviously, me right there kind of questioning his wealth, he fucked up and told me the truth. He was like, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I accidentally gave the ring that I was supposed to give you to a girl I was seeing at the time. And I just never got around to replacing yours. So fast forward to present day, I am currently moving all of my stuff out of our house and filing for divorce.
I'm going to tell you guys about the time that my entire class teamed up to take my teacher down. And by down, I mean fired, which is terrible, but... And to be clear, I wasn't involved in the incident. I was just asked in to be a witness along with the rest of the class. If you're not interested at this point, I don't even know. So when I was in 6th grade, I had this teacher called Mr. W. We're going to call him Mr. W. He was our science teacher. And he was fine. He wasn't amazing or bad. He was just okay. He did smell really, really bad. But again, that didn't affect his teaching at all. One day, however, I don't even know how this happened. He asked us all to get started on our work. He was a little irritated that day. I don't even remember why. One of the girls in our class, her name was Summer. She didn't have her workbook. Mr. W asked her where her work was. I didn't bring it today. They started arguing. The rest of the class was kind of silent, just watching this. She's a nice girl. She wasn't attacking him or anything. He did, however, get very angry. So angry, in fact, that he grabbed his binder and threw it across the room over her head. It just barely skipped her head and slammed on the floor. This wasn't like an empty binder from the dollar store. It was a teacher binder full of work. We were all silent. Summer stopped talking. Look for part 2 to find out what happens.
Story time about why I beat up my best friend. So a little background information. Her and I had been best friends since we were in 7th grade. Her family was rich, mine was poor, and at first she was a really good friend. She was always there for me whenever I needed her, until our freshman year of high school, which is when her and I started hanging out with boys. Now, my mom was kind of strict. She wouldn't really let me hang out with boys, but her mom was more lenient about her hanging out with boys. Every weekend, she would throw a party at her house, and she would throw them in her attic because 1, it was huge, and 2, her parents didn't give a fuck what she did up there. Anyways, she would always offer to do my hair and makeup before the party started, which always made me really excited because I never really put any work into my physical appearance. Well, little did I know, the only reason why she would offer to do my hair and makeup at these parties was so that way she could make me look like shit in front of all the boys. So after that, I taught myself how to do my own makeup and do my own hair, for Part 2 about why I beat up my best friend. So like I said, I learned how to do my hair and makeup, and she went on vacation for a month straight. Well, when she came home, she threw another party, and she was like, don't worry, after I'm done getting ready, I'll do your makeup and do your hair. And I was like, no, it's fine, I got it. She literally looks at me and she goes, are you sure? You don't really know how to do that. It'll probably look really bad. And I'm like, why the fuck would you say that? She goes, no, I don't mean it to be rude. It's just that, I want you to look good in front of the boys and stuff like that. Sis tried to talk me into getting a shower for a full, 20 minutes. So after that, the whole night, she's literally being a pick-me girl. She's making all these comments about me in front of the boys. And I just keep brushing them off until her next party. We got ready and I put on these expensive shoes that I had just bought. And she goes, wow, you just really like to copy my style, don't you? So she starts making comments that whole night about how my family's poor and stuff like that. And she threw up all over my shoes. So I dumped the trash can that everybody had threw up in that night on her, punched her in the face. But 2 months later, she came to my house and apologized.
Can I get some extra boba, please? More? 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 Please, some more? More?
Literally running out
More?
of nail space.
More? More? Perfect, thank you.
This is why waking up late might just save your life. One day when I was in elementary school, my mom and I both overslept, which meant I wouldn't be ready in time to get on the bus. School started at 8, my bus pickup time was at 7, and it was already 6:40 or something. I was still in my PJs and hadn't even had breakfast yet. My mom decided that today we would just tell the bus driver to go on ahead and she would take me to school, which would give me plenty of time to get ready. It's 6:50, I'm in my PJs, eating breakfast, and that's when we hear the bus pull up 10 minutes earlier than scheduled. My mom peeks her head out of the door into the foggy morning and waves the bus on. She closed the door and came back inside, but the bus didn't pull away. There's a knock at the door, and my mom opens it to find a man in a bus driver uniform. He explains he's a substitute bus driver because the regular driver called in sick, and that he's early because he wanted to get an early start on the route. My mom says she's taking me to school because we woke up late. He gets visibly upset and says he can wait a few minutes since he's already ahead of schedule. My mom says that we won't be ready in a few minutes and tells him to go on ahead. He seemed really angry about this, but turned around, got back on the bus, and left. But at 7 a.m., another bus pulls up to my house. My mom went out to talk to them and came back looking terrified.
Part 2 about how my dad was on the news and now everybody knows my last name. So like I said, my dad parked in the middle of an intersection and people were calling the cops. So when the police arrived, my dad was half passed out in the car. This happened in like the middle of broad day, like there's traffic everywhere. So when they finally get up to the car, my dad is literally slumped in the driver's seat. There was a bottle of whiskey in the door and it was completely empty. When they went to arrest him, he started resisting. He was screaming a bunch of profanities at them and started kicking them, threatening them with guns, which made the situation worse because my dad had no clue that there were any guns in the back of the car. So that just made the police think that they were his. So they take my dad to jail and he has like 7 charges against him. But we were happy because we knew where he was. Well, the worst part is, so the next day when I went to school, people were coming up to me asking if that was my dad on the news. Some people were even making fun of me because of what he did. And that's really fucking embarrassing for a 12-year-old. But it's okay, Dad, I still love you. Story time about my psychotic best friend. So we're gonna call this girl Gia. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 9th grade. I saw Gia sitting at this lunch table alone and I invited her to come sit with my friends and I. And after talking to her, I found out that she was a new student and she didn't have any friends. So her and I started hanging out and we became really close. Like she would come over my house 24/7. Well, my older sister was a grade above us and she would act really weird around her. And by weird, I mean like she would always make fun of me in front of my sister. And weirdly enough, try to cause problems between us. My sister didn't really like her. She thought that she was weird. But because she was my friend, she was being super nice to her. Well, like a month later, she started trying to become best friends with my sister. Like any conversation she would have, I would be like, oh, do you want to come over? She would be like, no, sorry, I'm hanging out with your sister today. And I would go home and I would be like, hey, are you hanging out with Gia today? And my sister would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like for part 2. Part 2 about my psychotic best friend. So like I said, my sister was like, no, what are you talking about? So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, this girl's really weird. But it gets even worse. She comes over my house one day to hang out with me and goes in my sister's room the whole time. My sister dyed her hair black, so what does she do? She dyes her hair black too. The obsession was like really fucking weird. Anyway, so the one night that Gia's over, yes, I still had her over after this because I didn't think it was really weird at the time. My sister had her boyfriend over and they were in the living room watching a movie, and the whole time Gia is begging me to go in the living room and watch the movie with them. So I'm like, fine, whatever, we'll do that. We go into the living room, we all sit on the couch, and my couch is kind of small, so like we all had to squish. So she sits her ass right next to my sister's boyfriend. Well, my sister's boyfriend got up and started freaking the fuck out. Well, turns out that Gia was trying to touch him under the blanket. So I told her to leave. The next day I got a whole paragraph of her saying that she just wanted to be like my sister because she never had an older sister.
Story time about how I found out my husband was cheating on me with his stepsister and her best friend. My husband and I had been married for 5 years. We were living in another state when he was fired from work and my job wasn't paying well enough. We decided to move in with his family until we could figure things out and get back on our feet. He had a stepsister and she was drop dead gorgeous. Since he didn't have a job, he would spend most of his time at home while I dropped off our son at daycare and then went to work. When I would get home, he'd go to the bar. At first, I thought things were normal and he was just stressed out about not being able to find work. However, I started getting suspicious once he started being a little aggressive towards me. He stopped wanting to talk to me as often and barely slept next to me anymore. His parents planned a trip to Europe and asked us to take care of the house while they were gone, to which we agreed. I noticed whenever I wasn't home, he would be home alone with his stepsister, and whenever I got back, they would both leave. I also noticed he wasn't trying very hard to find a job, leaving all the responsibilities to me. One day I was calling him while I was at work and he wasn't picking up. I had a bad feeling and asked my boss if I could leave early. Thankfully, my boss was nice and let me go. When I got home, I heard 2 girls giggling and the sound of a guy huffing coming from our room upstairs. What I saw next left me devastated. Part 2 of how I found out my husband was cheating on me with his stepsister and her best friend. When I came home and heard the sounds coming from our room upstairs, my blood was rushing through my body. I quietly went up the stairs and found my husband screwing his stepsister and her best friend at the same time. I was so devastated and heartbroken. I didn't know what to do, so I quickly rushed out of the house and went back to work. When I didn't return home that night, my husband called me asking why I was late and started accusing me of cheating. That's when I realized that none of them had seen me earlier and decided to get back at him. Earlier that day when I returned to work, my boss asked me if I was okay because he noticed my eyes were red from crying. I broke down, and you know how the saying goes, a shoulder to cry on file for divorce and make him pay for the nasty deed. He also told me that he'd be by my side and would take care of everything, including a place for me and my son to stay. I went home that night like nothing was wrong and acted like things were okay. The next day came and I went home early again to catch me in the act. This time I recorded footage of him cheating for evidence. In the end, I got a divorce, money, and full custody of my son. Now I'm married to my boss, living in a big house with someone who deeply loves and respects me.
Story time about how I caught my dad doing the dirty with my best friend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. My mom and dad have been married for 30 years. My dad started modeling when he was really young and he still does it to this day. Every single time that I would bring a friend over to my house, they would always talk about how cute my dad is. It never annoyed me at all because I was so proud of my dad, but it really bothered my mom. So out of respect for my mom, I would just tell my friends not to say anything. My mom is definitely the jealous type. My best friend and I have known each other for about 3 years. She was the new girl at school and we became friends, and ever since then we've been inseparable. She always comes over to my house, we have sleepovers, and my family really likes her. My mom even takes her shopping with us and buys her tons of stuff. She always comes with us to get manicures and pedicures and facials as well. A few years ago, my mom told me that my dad was unfaithful to her and it really upset me. Basically, my mom couldn't trust him at all. And ever since then, I've kept an eye on him as well. One day I came home early from work. I see my best friend sitting on the couch with my dad. She was kissing his neck. When they saw me, they got up from the couch part two. See my best friend kissing my dad on the neck, and when they both saw me, they jumped off the couch right away. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. My best friend said, "Oh, you're finally home," and my dad literally just walked toward the kitchen like nothing had happened. Best friend walks toward me to give me a hug, but I stop her straight in her tracks. I asked her why she was kissing my dad's neck. She laughs and said, "Of course I wasn't," and then I said I just saw it, and she said that she was just thanking him for all the stuff my mom and dad do for her. Right, I was not buying it. My dad didn't even look me in the eyes after that. I decided not to question her any further, but I was really angry with my best friend. After that, I was totally convinced that there was something going on between them. So I decided to set a trap. I told my mom and dad I would be at work all day and that I would be home really late. And I told my best friend the same thing and that I wouldn't be able to hang out with her. I knew that my mom would be at work all day, which meant that my dad had the house all to himself. I said bye to my dad, but I sneaked back into the house and hid in my room all day. Then I started hearing voices. It sounded just like my best friend. I opened my dad's bedroom door and there they are on the bed doing the dirty. Disgusting. Part 3 is up.
Story time about how my husband accidentally told me that he was cheating on me. So just some background information. My husband and I got engaged 2 years ago, and this whole situation happened a month after we got married. So fast forward, it's a Sunday morning. Well, usually every week on Sunday, I clean the whole house. So I woke up, went into the bathroom to take my ring off, and I could not get it off. Mind you, I had gained a little bit of weight since my husband and I got engaged. Anyways, I tried butter, I tried soap, I tried everything, even oil. So after trying to get it off for an hour straight, my finger was 3 times bigger than it usually is. So at this point, I'm really scared that I'm going to have to get it cut off. Because 1, I didn't want to ruin it, and 2, it was really expensive. So I call my husband and he's like, "Oh, call your dad. Firefighters always know what to do." So I called my dad and thank God he lived 5 minutes away because he drove over really quickly. Like for part 2.
I got married 4 years ago, and my husband and his family are many times over millionaires. My family is just middle class. Our wedding cost around $700K paid by him and his parents. My parents gave me a flat fee of $10K for a dress, which they are also giving to my sister too. My sister and her fiance are lower class. She has $170K in student loan while he has $110. They have $18K in medical debt and $35K in credit card debt. Well, last night was my sister's birthday dinner, and she announced she was engaged and wanted help paying for her wedding. She gave me a spreadsheet of how much she was going to need for her dream wedding. Anyways, her dream wedding is supposed to cost $100K, and as her only sister, I need to step up and help pay for her wedding since her parents are only giving her $10K for a dress. She said she needs me to give her at least $70K since I'm rich now. When I told her I'm not giving her $70K, she cried and said it wasn't fair how I get whatever I want. When she realized...
Hope you guys liked this video and found it helpful. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. It does help support us, and let's know what videos you guys want to see.